Wind farming has been in the news recently, and Joe Wertz of State Impact Oklahoma is here to bring us up to speed. Joe, it's good to have you, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
State Impact Oklahoma, tell us, what is that?
It's a collaboration. It originally started as a collaboration between NPR, National Public Radio, in Washington, D.C., and local stations. And it started in several states, about 8 states, and the idea was to get a couple of journalists and do a collaboration between local and national and pick a couple of issues and just really focus on those. Dig deep, stick around a subject and kind of avoid the drive-by journalism thing and really embed and dig down on that. And in Oklahoma, we focused on the economy and energy and some natural resources, kind of environmental questions. So been doing it for 3 years now, and it's now going strong with the NPR stations here in Oklahoma. We're one of the few of the projects that had all the stations. So
I want to talk with you today, Joe, about wind farming, and just before we get into it, it's like with some folks, what do you do for a living? Oh, I have a spaghetti farm.
Right.
And they're going to think we grow wind farming here.
Right.
So what is wind farming?
Well, it's wind farming. It's harvesting, really. It's harvesting the wind, and it's really just a piece of land with a turbine on it, a big windmill that's a couple hundred feet in the air, and it just catches the wind.
How many farms do we have in Oklahoma?
We have about 30, and some are being constructed right now, so they kind of have to stage up and build. So we have right around 30 right now, and they're kind of all over the state, concentrated, mostly at this point in western Oklahoma. A lot of good wind out there, and a lot of them. Their first ones were out that way. But they're moving around to getting close to this area. Proposals for them to be up in Osage County, and even talk of being more in the eastern parts of the state too.
Which begs the question: are they that effective?
Well, the companies certainly think they're effective, or they wouldn't be spending a whole lot of money building them. So effective at taking wind from the sky and turning it into energy? Yeah, absolutely. Question comes down to just business decisions and economics, the price of power, obviously energy and electricity is in a market, right? If natural gas is very expensive, then if you're an electricity provider, you might lean more heavily on coal, or if, maybe you can lean more on wind. But wind is really, booming here in Oklahoma. It's booming across the country. It's, comparatively very cheap to produce wind energy if you can do it.
Well, it seems like now, I mean, it didn't used to be this way, but it seems like now the big flatbeds carrying blades or housings can be seen in on a regular basis traveling our interstate system, and one would have to be, just totally off the chart somewhere, thinking about, I don't know, Facebook all the time, and not realize that, we got something by the horns here.
Well, you certainly do. You see these big truckloads of these turbine blades going. You see them on rail cars. We're moving up the charts when it comes to wind energy in Oklahoma. It really is booming. We're now last year, we were the 4th largest wind power producer in the country. And Oklahoma. And now we are, when you talk about wind power, you talk about 2 things: the amount of actual electricity you generate, and then the capacity you have to generate. We're 4th in both. So 4th in total amount of wind power that we're making, and 4th in the amount of capacity that we have. And they're adding it like crazy, and wind developers are pretty bullish on prospects here.
It started very subtly, really, and at first the voices weren't that loud. But all of a sudden, we're starting to hear controversy of some sort, folks against wind farming.
You bet.
Why would that be?
Well, there's lots of reasons why people are against wind farms. And I would say from the get-go, there's always been some level of opposition. You're right, it has kicked up more recently. There's a couple things. I think one is the question about where to put a wind farm, a wind turbine. A property owner who's making money from having one on their land has an incentive. He's getting they're getting a check every month. What about the neighbor who's not getting a check every month but has to look at this giant spinning turbine and hear it, and they make a shadow, they flicker. Depending on where the sun is and where the turbine is, it can almost make your house like a strobe light if you're near it. So there are concerns about that. There's concerns from some wildlife officials. In Osage County, for example, the Nature Conservancy up there is worried about it with birds and wildlife. And there's, other concerns just about what it means for an area as far as property values.
Well, in your opinion,
sure,
and you've seen it up close and personal, can we expect the continued growth of wind farming in Oklahoma?
I think so. I think it's going big. I think there's always going to be siting concerns, especially as you move closer to populated areas. If you look out in western Oklahoma, especially out in the Panhandle, a lot of those people, not everybody, but a lot of those people are really looking for it. We've interviewed ranchers and farmers who say essentially, look, I make money from the land. That's essentially what I do. I farm, I run cattle, I grow a little wheat, I have an oil and gas well. Why not have a turbine? It doesn't matter to me. It helps me diversify the money that I make off the land. And if there's a drought on, which there is in western Oklahoma, it helps for sure. There are certainly challenges, definitely. Right now there's a question about what's known as a transmission gap. So the first thing you want is good wind. That's where you want to build your turbine. But you've also got to get it to the electrical grid. And that's a problem in the Panhandle.
And it's always been a problem.
It's always been a problem. Yeah. And there's a proposal to build a new high voltage transmission line out there. So there are some infrastructure challenges, for sure some property rights challenges. Also at the Capitol, there's questions about tax credits and how much taxpayers are subsidizing this. There's no doubt that wind farms get a lot of tax breaks, get a lot of tax credits, incentives to come here.
But they also generate jobs.
They generate jobs, although, I think when you compare it to some of the other things that are incentivized, certainly the oil and gas industry gets incentives, but they produce a lot more jobs than a wind turbine. There are ongoing maintenance jobs for those, but it just depends on the areas. And certainly, say you create a few hundred jobs with a bunch of wind farms, that has a different economic impact in Beaver, Oklahoma, than it might in Enid or Ponca City. But 100 jobs in a rural, community.
And what they're not, it seems to me, like taking into account is the tax base is also going to increase. Hey, listen, Joe, we're out of time.
Okay.
Will you consider coming back?
Anytime.
Where do you live?
I live in Oklahoma City, but we're all over the state impact. So
great. Well, let's make it a date and get together again.
Let's do it.
Thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, some welcome wind farming, and the question is it worth it? We'll talk more about that on Green Country Perspectives.